thank you very much for coming. We want to get started on time because tonight we're going to keep the... Okay, so we're going to have to talk really loud tonight. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Rosenbaum, part of the COCL team here. And we have Amy Watson as well, Tom Christoph here, and Amy Ruiz is also handling part of the stuff. And we're thankful to have her on our group. I want to welcome all of you. Do I need to stand up? Okay, I can stand up. I want to welcome all of you here tonight, and thank you for coming. I know that you're all busy, and this is, but it's important for all of you. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care about the city of Portland and improving the Portland Police Bureau. Couple of points of business before we get started. You've probably, most of you have heard, maybe some of you haven't, that Paul DeMunis, Justice DeMunis, has to step down in chairing these meetings and being part of the COCL team for health reasons. And it's an enormous loss to all of us, and I've been honored to work with him, so has the rest of our group and you guys. He's a fantastic individual, just incredible person, and cares deeply about the community and youth, and I'm sorry that he can't be part of the team. As we move forward, we are considering what the next steps are to fill that leadership void, and we'll be consulting with various people, and we certainly suggest open to ideas, and we will, the COCL team will make a decision on that as we move forward, how to fill that leadership capacity to what extent. In the meantime, we are honored to have Amy Ruiz be on our team, and she's a fantastically talented person, as you know, and highly organized and very helpful to us so far. And I just want to thank some of the other folks, Brad Taylor, Stephanie Reynolds, Jonah, and also we have people that have been helpful along the way, a number of people, and it's been really good. One other point of business: we were going to originally plan to talk about the quarterly progress report tonight. We put that on hold because of all the procedural and structural issues around the COAB functioning that need to be addressed, and we will report on that and discuss that and take up most of the meeting at the next meeting of the COAB in May. It's too important that we resolve the many issues before us so that this group can feel comfortable functioning. The issue of timelines has placed a lot of pressure on this group and on us. We've talked with DOJ and with the city, and everyone's been understanding. We have their permission to discuss the quarterly report next month, but we've also sought and received approval from DOJ and the city to extend for 60 days the date to begin the community survey and related survey. And so, again, we want quality work. We don't want you guys to be pressured. We don't want to be pressured. We want to do it right. So, having said that, you've also received a couple memos in the last week, one from the COCL and one from DOJ, trying to help clarify roles and responsibilities of the COAB and the relationship between the COAB and the COCL. And want to thank everyone for DOJ for doing that. I'm more comfortable sitting down. I'll just talk louder. We have, I want to apologize for, I think some people interpreted the tone of our memo as being critical, and we certainly didn't intend it to be that way. We feel everyone needs to be empowered to talk and be part of this dialogue about the future of the city of Portland and the police department. And I'm also feel badly that the public hearing last week did not go that well. There was a lot of frustration and emotion around that. And without belaboring the details of that now, I think we've all learned something from that process. There will be another public hearing. I hope that the committees, and there's a subcommittee, of the COAB that will be responsible for helping move that forward and plan that, so it's a better reflection of what we need out of the settlement agreement. Let's see, what else did I want to say before I turn this over? You know, with this as a foundation of moving forward, we hope we can begin to have a fresh start this evening. Maybe, I think Bud used the idea of rebooting or restarting. It's kind of like what I think we need right now. We all started this oversight with the best of intentions. I don't think we got off to the best start we could have. We have a lot of energized and creative and independent people at this table. And I think what we did is just said, let's go out and get started, and against a backdrop of all these deadlines and pressures, and without clarifying the roles sufficiently and getting to know one another, and basically pausing to listen to all the messages that are going on here. I want to be the first one to acknowledge that we need to do that and reflect upon our mission and get a fresh start. Again, I want to thank you for being here tonight and for doing this hard work together. Just one other comment. I hope that we can make a commitment in these meetings to kind of model the kind of civility and respectful behavior that we expect of the police and that we expect of others in the city. And that you're leaders, we're leaders, and we want to maybe I'm hoping that we can make a commitment to some of the key values that implies, of being respectful to each other, not bullying anybody, not threatening anybody, giving people a voice to be heard. Everybody has a different way of giving that voice, of being transparent and open in our transactions and working through the forums and stuff that we're setting up rather than through traditional emails. And that we have the compassion for the people that we care about that are being adversely affected here, and that we cooperate and that we collaborate as a team among all of us, and that we give a chance. We need to work together and not trying to diminish each other's efforts. It's too early in the game to say anyone's failed at this, and to cooperate with everyone, including the Portland Police Bureau. We need their help to reform them. They have the things we need, the information, and so I'm hoping we can move forward in good faith with good intentions to build a model police bureau in Portland for the city of Portland. And so with that, I want to start moving on to the next agenda item, which is that Amy is going to handle, which is the approval of the March 12th meeting. Minutes, I'm sorry.
And also, Stephanie Reynolds pointed out that we have not approved the minutes from the first meeting. So both of those are in your packet. I know Justice Muniz had emailed out the March minutes earlier in the week. I may had some comments on those, and I did go back and watch the video and reconcile those with your comments. So the second version of minutes, the March 12th minutes, anything in there that's underlined is a change from when Justice Muniz sent those out. So if folks want to take a quick second, it's largely on page 5. Looks like mine skipped a page. But if someone would like to move the March 12th minutes, yes, page 6 has a few underlined items that are additions or clarifications based on the comments that I may emailed around. Page 6 and 8 are the changes. Philip?
Yeah, I wanted to add one correction on page 8, if that's all right. Yeah, it says that the OAD organization for the deaf.
What paragraph?
Oregon Association for the Deaf. The first paragraph on page 8. So OAD did an analysis for 2015, and they found that there were about 186,117 deaf people living here in Oregon, not 4,000. So I wanted to clarify that.
186.
186,117.
117. Great, got it.
Thank you.
V?
So page 6, let's see, I guess that would be paragraph 4. A COAB member, that was me, and then it was seconded by Corey.
Got it. Any other amendments? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended.
And I second.
Philip seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? And to clarify that motion, were you doing just March or March and February?
That was my question.
Let's say that was March. Would somebody like to move to approve February's minutes?
So moved.
Corey,
Propose
thank you.
to approve February as well.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. And then I've got up on the screen, I'll be taking, Joan is taking the minutes, but I'll be taking some notes on items that we're keeping on the parking lot to address at a later date, items that perhaps should move to the executive committee or a subcommittee, and then I'll also take notes, with the exception of that one, on the future motions that we have tonight.
Okay, thank you, Amy. We're now ready to move on to the third agenda item, which is David Knight of the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is right here, and we thank him as well as the other members of the justice team who are here, and I'll leave that to David to make introductions, is going to discuss. We ask them to come and help us understand their interpretation of the settlement and our roles and responsibilities, given this somewhat ambiguous things that are going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I know all of you. You might not know me. My name is David Knight. I have been out here in Oregon for the last year working on this case, and I was very sad to be sent back to DC about a week before your first meeting. But I want you to know that I have read about each of you. I know something about each of you. I've watched all of your meetings on YouTube. I'm one of the 56 viewers. So I am very passionately committed to what you're doing, and I wanted to come tonight to engage with you, explain some things, ask a lot of questions, answer questions. Let me start just very briefly by explaining the DOJ team generally, so that you know, and something that might come up later in our discussion is the idea of an org chart for you to understand all of these players and how they interact, and we should put that information on it. But just so you know, over here, if he'd wave, is Billy Williams. You've met Billy. He's been here before. He is currently the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon. That means he is the leading law enforcement official for the Department of Justice for the state of Oregon. So he runs an office of over 100, and yet obviously this is something he's very committed to and passionate about because he's here and he's been here before. Billy has also been there since the very beginning of this investigation and through the settlement, so he is an incredible resource for all of us and for you. Also next to him is Janice Herrera, and she is my boss here in Portland, and she is the civil chief. So she is over all civil cases, including civil rights cases. So she's the reviewer on this, and she is someone who is committed and learning with us about assisting you and getting you through this process. You have also met Adrienne Brown. She was the civil rights coordinator through this entire case here in Portland, through the investigation, through the settlement. She's been at one of your meetings already, so you've met her. She was in DC for a little over a year because they sent her there on an assignment. She'll be back in 30 days. She'll be here at these meetings going forward. So that's 3 people in the local office committed to making sure this happens. Because Adrienne wasn't here and because this was so important, they brought me out from DC for a year. So even though I'm not originally from Portland and not a local, I feel like this is my second home now. I'm elated to be back today. I love your weather. I love your people. I love your donuts. So just so you know a little bit about me, I'm a disability rights attorney by training. So I've done that for 11 years. I am doing that again back in DC. This case obviously has intersections with disability rights issues. While in Portland, I did other disability investigations and cases. I also worked on the other matter in our office, which is against the state and about the need for more community-based mental health services. And that obviously intersects incredibly with this case. We don't want the police to have interactions with people who should have had the support systems already in place and shouldn't have elevated to that level. So there's a lot happening on the DOJ side, and we just want to make sure that we're present at these meetings and answering questions. I think there are a lot of things. I'm 45 minutes on the agenda. I think there are a lot of things we want to talk about. We sent out a memo yesterday. I think you got it. It's also in your package. I want to know if you have questions about it. One of the things, and I've talked to many of you offline, and I want to talk to all of you. I brought business cards. You should always feel free to reach out to us. You can also collectively, as a COAB or as a steering committee, send questions to me on behalf of the Department of Justice and Ellen on behalf of the city, and we'll get answers to you. You know, as Ellen has said before and Billy has reflected, and our memo says, your confines are within the settlement agreement about what you have the ability to do. And the COCL chairs the COAB, and at some of the administrative level decisions, we're going to defer to the COCL to make sure this runs smoothly. I've watched your meetings, and I want to get out of sort of the structural stuff, and I want to get to the things that we wanted you for, which are the substantive subject matter expert reviews of what's happening. When we talk about your independence, no one should be censoring the conclusions you draw. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. We also need the community to value that. And so we want to get to a point where that can happen. So if it's me and Ellen helping you understand something in the settlement agreement, if it's talking to you about something about your interaction with the COCL, a reboot is a wonderful word for what we'd love to see happen, and I'd love to know how to assist in that. Say that louder.
A memory dump would be.
A memory dump. Another thing that I wanted to make sure happens is we really do want to see the steering committee put into place. There were some concerns, I guess, at the last meeting about what that would entail and who would be on it. I've talked to Bud some, who was going to propose how you were going to create a steering committee. There is so much for a steering committee to do, and that would really be the leaders identified among your group who can come to us with questions, can guide the COCL in creating an org chart, something I just suggested that I think you desperately need and we can work with you on. Setting the agenda, identifying the training needs. I've heard things about sort of the need for some group conduct guidelines and that type of thing, a leadership group among you to help push that forward. I'm desperately hopeful that we leave tonight with an executive committee or steering committee in place. I can address issues about alternates if we should do that, which is that the agreement does envision alternates, especially as far as the members of the public. The Portland Commission on Disability and the Human Rights Commission, I think very smartly identified alternates for the people that they were nominating as well. Members of the COAB come from potentially 10 different nominating sources, whether it be the chief of police, individual commissioners, PCOD, HRC, the public. And I think administratively, just like on a jury, when you have alternates, we want people to know that they've been tapped by a selection source to maybe fill in if someone steps down, because that might happen. This might be more than some people can, are going to be able to contribute to. At the same time, that role of alternate, we believe and have said in the memo, really doesn't have a role other than being someone who knows they're tapped to fill in if and when that's necessary. We definitely want to accommodate any need for an alternate that might come into effect if someone has an accommodation request. Anyone on the COAB should know that we are committed to making sure people are supported, and you should talk to the COCL or me and Ellen about how we can do that support, and we'll have that confidential, interactive process to make sure you're being supported. I think that some of that has been fleshed out in the memo from the COCL, and I haven't met all of you yet, so I don't know if you have concerns, but I want to make sure I do meet all of you and I do address them. So I think that's enough lecturing from me at the moment, and maybe I can see what I haven't answered or what you want to know from us going forward.
So I just want to clarify, so you're saying that alternates cannot be on a lead position for the subcommittee, they cannot lead a subcommittee or be on the executive committee, correct? Is that what, according to the agreement?
So our memo has specifically said, according to the agreement, because the executive committee is making decisions and bringing them to the COAB, those should be members of the COAB, voting members of the COAB. Or maybe, it has to be voting members? Okay. And I want to make sure I get this right each time I say it too. When it comes to the structure of the COAB generally, the COCL is the chair, and there's a lot of structure that isn't specifically in the agreement. So we're going to defer to how the COCL sets it up and what the ideas are about how it should work. We want, and it sounds like, members of the public and alternates and a whole lot of really useful resources in the community are being invited to subcommittees. As far as the chairing of subcommittees, Dennis, can I defer to you and ask where we are on that?
Well, I mean, our position was, and we did talk to various people about this, was that because the chair of the subcommittee is acting pretty much on behalf of the COAB, that person should be a voting member, and that that alternates and other members of the community could participate as members of the subcommittee, but that's an open process. But that was our interpretation.
And so I'll answer then that DOJ at this point believes we'll just defer to the COCL and how that's being structured, and think it's more exciting to get to those subcommittees and start creating some product and figuring out what you need to make sure that happens.
So with that, as a follow-up, thank you, David. As far as direction on our subcommittees and the work that we need to do, is it up to the subcommittee to ascertain the information and request it through the COCL so that we can evaluate and analysis of the information what was in place before to what is happening now? Because the way I understand it from the email is that we're really just restricted now to pretty much advising the COCL on any information they bring to us, and we're not supposed to do anything else, and it's really confusing. And so we really just need to make sure that we get proper instruction so we can move forward and do this right.
Okay. And I don't want to constrain the COAB. I want to focus you and help you get the work done. So it's hard to speak in theoreticals, but let's talk about barriers to information that you want, or talk about in specifics now and later. Like I said, DOJ will be at the table through all of this, and we'll find a way to work through that.
Right, so I think we need, that's why we need, this time is for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to respond to that. I think
Okay.
that, I think that the memo from DOJ, as well as our memo, tries to clarify what the intent was, and we've consulted with the city and other members, that our role as the COCL was to investigate the compliance of the Portland Police Bureau on all the measures in the settlement, and that the COAB was in an advisory role on that, but that the COAB can do, in what the issue of independent investigation. I mean, first of all, there's practical problems associated with having multiple independent investigations ongoing, right? And we've seen that kind of problem emerge already, where different people trying to learn more are starting up and approaching the Portland Police Bureau, asking for all kinds of data that we're not even part of a subcommittee, but independent of that. And so that's a problem, because we're going to be requesting some of the same things, but we need to coordinate our efforts. We are connected at the hip here is the problem. It's not a problem, it's actually a good thing if we can work together. So that's part of it. There's a practical reason for it. The other part is that David and other folks from the DOJ can clarify this, but the issue of the primary focus of the COAB is in community engagement and representing the community's assessment of this process. So there's all kinds of investigative work that can be done, not with just surveys, but interviews and having public hearings and meeting with people from various marginalized communities that are represented here and that were spoken up at the last meeting, to get their views on the plans of the Portland Police Bureau, past plans, current plans, future plans, and also give us feedback on what we're doing. Your advisory, your voluntary, you have other jobs too you have to do. We're working on this and trying to, we're completely open to ideas about what kinds of data, for example, we should be getting from the Portland Police Bureau. We have lots of ideas because we're somewhat familiar with police data, but on the other hand, there's no reason we are on these, working with you on these subcommittees. So I don't know if that answers, if you want to.
So there's two different parties in this whole agreement that are currently actively investigating and reviewing data and documentation from the Portland Police Bureau. One is the COCL, who was conceived of to do that, to be the compliance officer, and we ensure that the city paid the budget for that to happen. And second is the Department of Justice. So we are the entity that enforces this agreement. We get the quarterly reports from the city. We review them both in-house and with our own experts. So next month you'll have the first draft report from the COCL. At some point you'll also start to have the assessments from the Department of Justice. We want you to take a critical eye to those and say if how we're doing in reviewing it, how the city's doing in implementation of the settlement agreement. But I think with so much to be done and such a critical role that you play in community engagement and understanding how to be the voice for the community, that you doing an independent third investigation of the raw data, you might learn that's not something you want to do. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars doing it. And second, I'm not sure that that is really the role of the COAB.
Philip, then we'll get Rochelle and Abel.
Yes, my understanding with the settlement agreement is that it does mention that the COAB, first and foremost, should be independent, an independent organization, and it should have unlimited access to information, whatever it needs in order to help us do an assessment and generate ideas and provide advice. And obviously, it's hard to come up with ideas and generate input if we don't have that raw data. So I'm not fully satisfied with the clarity. I feel that it's still a little ambiguous, and I really would like some sort of black and white answer as to what exactly our role is.
So the idea of your independence absolutely is enshrined in the idea that no one is going to censor your conclusions and the assessments that you bring back to us about how the city and how we are doing. That is your independence, but you're not, and as we said in the memo, a sovereign organization that has free reign to expand your powers or to make direct requests from the parties, to go to the city and go through files. If there is so much that's going to be coming to you, starting with the very first report from the COCL next month. If you, as you are getting all of this information from them and then us, are unsatisfied and say that that's not enough for you to assess, I'm going to suggest give us examples of what else you're needing and that you would need to accomplish it, and let us respond in that sort of real world example.
Yeah, and I directly responding, I would like to say that there's no intention of excluding people from making requests. It's a matter of how we work together to make that happen, so that it's coordinated. So, if you have specific data that you would like to look at, the problem is there's other issues of handling data from the police bureau and being approved to, and de-identifying this data. There's a lot of issues around the privacy of individual reports that has to be handled. Now, we are going to get access to the data that we think we need. I see the role of the COAB is telling us what they think needs to be requested and what data we should be looking at. Now, everything's transparent, so as David said, the conclusions we reach or whatever, people are very free to say, no, I don't think that's right. And I don't think that's what, look at this. I don't think it's a good idea to have the data being floating around. People can make records requests independently. That's another whole issue. People, it's time consuming. There's a lot of data we're requesting, and probably the city charges for those things. I don't know. But there's a lot of issues around that. So I think that we hopefully can just work together. No one's trying to keep anybody from having answers.
Rochelle?
I think the big problem is the interpretation of the word independence. among committee members, but also with the public. The public sees that word and they're expecting that the COAB will independently, not under the COCL, do certain things. And so I think it needs to be even more clarified. What exactly can the COAB do independently, and what can we not do?
And so I'll reiterate that the independence of the COAB is your conclusions and the advice that you give to the COCL and to the city and the parties. As far as your authority, that is clearly enshrined in the settlement agreement. And for example, the COCL chairs the COAB, and so you can't independently, free of the COAB, of the COCL, go to the Portland Police Bureau and flip through filing cabinets. You know, your advisors to all of us and your expertise. I mean, you probably wouldn't know what to do with that information. We are hiring experts that can help analyze and do that. The COCL has certain expertise, which is why this team has been brought in. What we want from you is that critical insight about A, feedback on how we're doing, and B, what the community engagement element needs to be. Because I'm trying to outline that we have two different groups doing oversight here, but no one is in charge of the community engagement except for you. And that is the critical thing you bring, and I don't want to lose that. So I want to focus on so many things that are important for you to do early on. Feedback on the survey, feedback on the other, let's see, what else is? The report that's coming out. I mean, there's a lot coming at you. And then if we need to revisit, and like I said, we'll be here at each of these meetings about something that you think is critical for you to accomplish, and you can't serve your role without it. But I'm not sure I'm hearing an example of that.
Well, I'm thinking if you try this experiment again, you might leave that word out.
Yeah.
Okay. And that one of the pitfalls of experiments is that we have a lot of lessons learned from it, and we're also going to ask for your feedback throughout the process, because this isn't the only community in which the department gets involved, and we want to learn from this about what works and what doesn't.
Yes, David, I'm looking at your memo here regarding COAB administration and operations, and looking at the first bullet. In that last sentence, there's a reference to the parties to the settlement agreement, and could you explain why Albina Ministerial Alliance, the coalition, isn't mentioned or listed here as a party?
So I think for simplicity, we've asked the COCL team to, instead of saying the parties, and so all of you understand when someone's been conferred with, that, for example, in this situation, it was the city and the Department of Justice. When it comes to the settlement agreement, those are the two parties to the agreement. The PPA and the AMAC played a role in the litigation and in the investigation stage, and the AMAC was granted amicus status, but are not parties to the settlement agreement at the point where we are now. And I want to make sure that Ellen concurs with me, and if I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the feedback we were getting is that, it made it seem as though the AMAC had been consulted by referring to parties to the settlement, yes, when in fact that had not occurred. So I want to acknowledge that. And then, but to the larger point about their involvement, I mean, their involvement has been critical both in the investigatory stage and in the implementation stage, and we have a collaborative agreement with them. And so I think we were the memo, I mean, obviously it's not my memo, but it was intended to convey the sense that the people who entered into the settlement agreement and are listed are the city and the United States, but that was not intended to mean that there haven't been other parties, particularly the AMAC, who have been actively involved and continue to be actively involved in it. So, is that?
And let me let all of you know that the Department of Justice still has that collaborative agreement with the city and the AMAC. We spoke with their counsel this morning, and we want to make sure that we're engaging with them as we promised to do on an ongoing basis, not just on the COAB, but on broadly the matter and the settlement with the city. So the AMAC is still at the table very much with us. When it comes to the implementation of the settlement agreement, at this point when we refer to the parties, we're talking about the Department of Justice and the city.
I sitting at this table because of the work of the AMA and other community groups.
This harkens back to, again, my idea of an org chart. That wasn't my idea. Some of you have mentioned it, but I think if we could map all this out, because everyone thinks differently, and there could be a visual representation of all of these different elements, that also could be of assistance. And so I'm hoping a steering committee might think that's a good idea and can take it up and work with Ellen and I to get that correct and get that out to all of you.
Right.
You mentioned that a couple of times, Senator Burley. I mean, I wanted to recognize that the counsel for the AMA is here tonight and reached out to us earlier, and obviously there are other AMA members here. So
So I have Sharon, then V, then Philip, then Rabbi Kana.
Okay, I just kind of wanted to read a little statement that I prepared, because the reason why we're even having this discussion this evening is because the implementation of this group was done incorrectly. Instead of orientating the group, we were thrown out to the public without explanation of city public laws. We were not given time to select our executive committee properly before going out to the public. We were not introduced to the COCO prior to any given given any training by anyone. Pretty much, we feel we've been set up to fail, to create an adverse relationship between the COAB, COCO, our role, the COCO's role, our relationship with the city and the police bureau, and the settlement agreement. We were told it was only going to be 10 hours of volunteer a month. Well, we have another full-time job based on the subcommittees and the amount of information that we're expected to analyze and review to ascertain the best practices and advise to the COCO and the city. We have been treated with less than proper appropriate training, being taken to task on our role and responsibility without proper introductions or orientation on the whole process. The COCO is too far away, living in Chicago, we're in Portland, the city that doesn't work. I'm sorry, this is horrible. How do you hire people from out of town who have no connection with the city and understanding our dynamics? If the city wants another report that is to their favor, well, they've just wasted a lot of money. We are not going to get anywhere with this the way it's set up right now. We need to restart definitely and make sure that the COAB is given the right training, the introduction, before we bring all these people out here and look like idiots and fools and be embarrassed. And it's not okay. I'm really upset.
Our tax dollars are paying for you.
And I recommend that definitely moving forward, that each subcommittee be given a budget, that each member be given a stipend per month for transportation spent on performing tasks, if it's beyond the 10 hours, with timesheets if need be turned in to the subcommittees, and extra time that we're spending reviewing information. This is a lot of work. It's very consuming, and people have a life too. As well, that if this doesn't get straightened out, as the co-leader of the Community Outreach Committee and of the Data Committee, I'm recommending that we go back before Judge Simon and report what's happening to the process, and ask that we be given extension on times within what the settlement agreement says, so that we can regroup. And if we're really serious about getting this work done and bringing reform to the Portland Police and to our city to change the culture of how citizens have been treated, then we need to make this happen, and we need to do it the right way.
So there's a lot in that statement.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, that's what we've been experiencing.
I can't respond to all of it, and I think it's not all directed at me, but I will say a few things, which is that I believe in my heart that no one has set you up to fail, because that would be a lot of effort for something that we believe passionately about. And so we're going to continue to problem solve. I love this idea of rebooting and hearing from you how to move forward, and those are a lot of ideas for that. As far as Judge Simon, as far as the court, I just want to make clear that the Department of Justice and the city being parties, if there's non-compliance with the agreement, the Department of Justice would be the one to flag that. We'd go to the city, and if we couldn't resolve it, we'd go to the judge who entered this agreement. If you think that you need an extension on a timeline and that will help get a better result, then let us know, and we'll be at these meetings. And we just were asked by the COCO a week or two ago for a 60-day extension on the survey so that we could get that right. And they consulted with the Department of Justice and the city, and we said sure. And so, if we're all in agreement and we want you to succeed, we will give you that flexibility as volunteers to move forward in a way that you can accomplish, and we'll have no need to go to the court and have a dispute because we will understand and be flexible. And I hope that's one example of our flexibility. We want to continue to do that, and we want to continue to be here to answer questions like that.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, Sharon, and thank you for your comments. I think I agree with most of what David said. I think we are trying our best right now to help out with to make the COAB working, and by that we are working with the city to get training set up that people are needed about handling public meetings, which has been a problem so far, and also we're trying to clarify roles and responsibilities. We've worked hard on that. We're hoping we're getting closer, and with that, and I also, the issue of payment and work. I mean, people are volunteering their time. The issue of investigating and doing all these tasks, I mean, partly this was meant to be, it wasn't meant to be a full-time job. It was, I think the design was that this would be, people would provide advice and direction as needed, that we would be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And so that, I don't know what the answer to that is. Part of, I think, the comments about us, I've heard a lot of comments in emails and in the newspaper. The only way I can address that, I mean, one of the main concerns, and I think the issue of independence that's being brought up here too, stems to some degree from a lack of trust that we are going to do a thorough and independent investigation. I hear comments all the time that we're somehow connected, whether we might, that the city or the police department, that we might give some favorable review. I can't think of a more independent, we're criticized for being out of town, but more independent. We don't have connections or any contracts other than with the people in Portland and in the police bureau or the city. Amy Watson and I are both tenured professors at a major university. We have lifetime jobs. We can say whatever we want and get away with it. We can quit tomorrow if we want and get away with it. We don't need the city of Portland to be nice to us. I don't think you're going to get anybody more independent. And so we're going to give an honest assessment of the Portland Police Bureau with input from all of you. We just want to work with you. We don't want people to try to stop the progress. I feel that there's many good people on this group that have sent us emails saying they appreciate the fact that we're trying to get some order going here and not to be distracted by outside entities that, so we're trying to do that. And we're trying our best. We're not perfect, and we're open to ideas. So I just want everyone to act in good faith that they're coming here and want to be part of this because they're trying to make the city of Portland better. That's what we were hoping for. And yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay, you're in charge. Go ahead.
I mean, in the order of, I think people were going to speak, and I know my thing, but I just wanted to lend my support to what you just said. I think we do need to reboot. I think we may have started off on the wrong track and we were traveling down it, and I think there has been a shift, and I personally sense that and feel that, and I would like to move forward in good faith, and I appreciate your efforts on this, and I hope we can just do that instead of going back over some of the stuff that we've already experienced. It would be nice to have a place to express some of that, but I don't think it's at these meetings right now. I think right now I want to start afresh and collaborate and move forward.
V, up next.
So I just have a couple of questions and maybe a little bit of feedback. I have a couple of questions and a little bit of feedback, maybe not. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Seriously?
Seriously, we need a microphone. This is not
Okay.
work for the public.
I'm just gonna forego my comments and I'll submit them somehow by some process, because I don't like yelling. All
Would
right.
you like me to repeat your words?
No,
after you say it?
I'll yell. Okay, in page on page 10 in the, what's it called? Clarifications of roles and responsibilities for the COAB and COCL. It characterizes COAB as a representative body. Does this in any way replace the fact that the community speaks for itself, for the community? Does the doc seek to diminish, devalue, or abrogate the individual voice? Sorry for yelling.
Oh, thank you.
I like yelling.
In a free society, nobody's individual voice should be silenced. And so, how can we do that? The whole idea though was to set up a process through the various ways that people were selected to have more of a voice in this process. And that the public's still able to comment, that we've set up forums now for people to have a systematic comment that doesn't go against public record laws and all that. And so, and does the community speak? Yeah, I think that's why we're trying to work with you to do community surveys and all the other stuff, so that everybody in a representative democracy has some voice here, but especially the people that have been adversely affected. So I think that's going to require some COAB attention, and we can use your help too, and you guys independently can pursue that.
Okay, so I have a response to that.
Okay, sure.
So in terms of the latest Portland Police Bureau's sponsored public hearing, during the time that I was getting the flyers out, and the reason why I wanted to do the flyers was so that I could actually communicate to individual people living in their homes in Portland, Portlanders. So what I found out was what I identified was a major trust issue. Okay? What I'm trying to figure out is two things: how we can motivate or influence or entice people to even want to fill out the surveys. Okay? One of the main things that I saw was trust, and it's not me. I don't have a problem, and people don't have a problem with me. People have a problem with the Portland police. Can you guys hear me back there? Yes. All right. I'm sorry for yelling at you.
Are you talking about surveys in general, or?
Surveys across the board. So when we had the public hearing, we had surveys. As I was handing out flyers, I was letting people know that the surveys are an important component in terms of that I believed at the time, in order to inform the Portland, in order to inform PPB about the disparity between their perception and the reality and perception of the community. So, in terms of working on the community engagement outreach subcommittee, or committee now, I'm not sure, because now you're referring to it as a committee, and it's actually committee under a board, right? And then it's subcommittee under, but never mind, I'm all about structure.
Org chart.
Unfortunately, we didn't have the privilege, I guess, of having Vince Elmore at the meeting, and thereby, by him not showing up, our voice was necessarily diminished, devalued, and gone. And we invited him to the meeting, and then when I talked to Amy Watson about changing the agenda, we were given 6 days to prepare for a pretty large event, not huge, but it's pretty large. We had to then take take the agenda change up to the general board, right? But since we couldn't discuss anything or vote on anything through the emails, we were essentially obstructed, right? And our ability to speak on behalf of the community was abrogated. And so I still have, because I'm such an optimist, a willingness to come to the table and say, well, hey, how can we figure out a real pathway to actually collaboratively work with the PPB and avoid the fiasco that occurred and the trauma and the tragedy that occurred for people who have already been victims of the Portland Police Bureau.
Well,
So I've added that as a likely item that subcommittee should take up, because I think it's a much larger conversation, so I just want to make sure we note that for the next agenda for that subcommittee.
Right, so the public hearing next time, and Amy, you may want to respond to this too, but I mean, it has to be a more deliberative time. It can, what kind of process do we want to engage in within the parameters of the settlement agreement? Again, so and part of the reason the Portland Police Bureau was actually there, I'm not saying their presentation was as good as it could have been, but
it was great.
But the point is that the whole idea, we heard from several people, so the idea was to comment on Portland Police Bureau's outreach plan and what they've done in the past, their past community outreach plan.
So it would
And
be
so
great.
people from this group told me they could not, there was no way to discuss that without knowing what it was. So there was false expectations about what this meeting was about. It wasn't, just a hearing. But I think that it should have been redone differently and not so much time devoted.
And we have to have a conduit. If I can plead to Vince to please show up or to please respond to the emails, because we are doing our level best to provide the service on behalf of and for the community members. And otherwise, I would not be spending my time, my critical time.
We do have to say that there's not enough time today to get off in this, but this is the subcommittee task for the next one to get this right.
Perfect.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify something with the ground rules as far as communicating before. Just
Because I'm deaf, when a person seconds or something, if you could just identify yourself or use the gavel as a turn-taking mechanism so that I can know and identify who's speaking at the time. So I do have a question for David. In order to access information for myself personally, I'm very interested in being involved with the Portland Police Bureau trainings to get a full understanding of what that looks like, not just the policy, not just the regulations or rules on excessive use of force, but I actually want to be involved with that hands-on training so that I can see the scenarios, I can see what the process looks like for actually training officers. I want to be a first-hand witness so that I can collect and document that information and bring it back to the COAB, what I've learned from that training and what my takeaways were, and get feedback from the COAB so that we can make recommendations to the police department. I want to know what specific barriers are for that accessibility. And that's my first question. Would you like to respond before I go on to the second question?
I'll give a quick response, which is that if you have the time and the energy to participate in that, we would be happy to work with you. We will certainly be observing training. We have to work with the Portland Police Bureau to plan that out. And but again, it's the feed, how that data, how that information is used. It's to bring us back to the COAB as a group and to the COCL and to figure out what implications that has for making recommendations.
We'll discuss that further in email, I'm sure. And then in relation to the town hall meeting, the public comment forum, I just did want to make a recommendation. In the future, when you hosted the planning of that event. If you could please check in with us on the COAB so that we can provide advice, because we are the people who have lived experience with mental health issues. We have lived experience in Portland, and we have lived experiences with interactions with the police. And that's why we're here. So the town hall meeting I felt was a COCL event. It was a Portland Police Bureau event. It was a city event. And I do believe that that contributed to the situation that happened, and because there wasn't other perspectives involved. So I just did want to make that recommendation that you could seek feedback from the COAB before planning any other future events.
So I want to support Dr. Marion and others who have talked about the idea of what it means to reboot. I'm not certain that actually it's reboot that we're talking about. It's not unusual that you have to change the wheels on the airplane as it's flying. The things happen that way, and we're kind of figuring this out. And I feel the desire to be a partner with COCL in figuring this out. So forgive me if I sort of step back a little bit. I spend a lot of time in my life translating. So, and one of the things that I think that happened was we began to meet, and I didn't have a clear sense of mission, really what we were supposed to do, as opposed to what COCL is supposed to do and all of those things. There was a lot of documents that were coming around, but I didn't have any clarity. So can I see if I can state it, and you can tell me if I do have this right. DOJ found pattern of practice with the Portland Police. There is a suit and a settlement. Portland Police believes that they are making proper progress towards making institutional change that's necessary to eliminate that pattern in practice. COCL, as an independent organization, is charged with making sure that that's actually happening. Just because Portland Police thinks they're doing that doesn't mean that that's what's happening. COAB's responsibility is to hear what your findings are, to communicate that to the public, and to communicate to the public back to you how that's being received. It's clear that there is a lack of trust, and it's been mentioned a number of times, in the community. The community is not going to simply accept that the Portland Police says everything's okay, and they're probably not going to accept if COCL says everything is okay. So we are, if I understand our mission now, we are the conduit between the information that you provide, which we are to assess and see if it makes sense to us, translate that to the community, translate the community's concerns back to you, and the information flows both ways. Am I correct in that statement?
Absolutely. You need to be sitting up here.
I would agree as well, and I like the way you put it. And I would love to see that. I want to empower you to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sharon, then V.
Can I make a recommendation that we talk about attendance for the COAB? I guess maybe that's part of the role of alternates and that type of thing. Attendance of the members of the COAB participating in the process and being at the meetings and subcommittees.
So can I ask if that's a specific question, and is it something
Yes.
that we should have the executive committee?
Yes, definitely, but then how do we bring that back to the COCL to address and just make sure, because we want, if people are going to be on the group, then they should be in attendance, and what is an excusable absence and what is not, and how many, within a given period of time that we're all doing work, but now that we are getting a clarification on our actual role, it might be, okay, but since we won't be doing work, we'll just be looking at the work and saying whether that's sufficient. But I think that's something we need to address as well in our orientation training.
Just a couple of questions. Is the city of Portland still appealing the settlement agreement, and is Ellen Ozniak, I hope I pronounced that correctly, part of the city's attorney's office?
I should probably let Ellen answer. The city is appealing a certain element of the agreement, and Ellen Osnatch does work in the city attorney's office.
Does that present a conflict of interest? And can I ask you that in terms of legality or legal advice or whatever?
So, I mean, we outlined it a bit in the memo, but the settlement agreement specifically has a role for the city attorney to play, and the judge found the agreement as we structured it to be fair, adequate, and reasonable. So I'm not seeing a conflict of interest there.
Okay. Okay. And does the appeal in any way seek to, again, abrogate the community's voice, opinion, or status? Sorry for yelling.
Is that question for me as well?
Yes.
I honestly do not believe the city's appeal is about silencing the community's voice, and we appreciate that the city has partnered with us to move forward with things like the creation of the COAB, something that I played a large role in helping to make sure we pushed and we got you all seated so that we could have these conversations and this dialogue. So I think the city's committed to that, absolutely.
And one last thing.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to make a proposal that the COAB and COCO will have diversity, respect, and inclusivity, gender identity sensitivity, implicit bias sensitivity, respectful language, cultural diversity, and a little bit of truth and reconciliation training, given the concept of rebooting seems to be flying around here. And therein, but not limited to, permission to contact the Portland Office of Equity and Human Rights. I'll need a second on that.
So that's also on the agenda later today, though. We're discussing training towards the end with Ellen. So I think that is going to dovetail
I'm ready to
really
rock
nicely.
and roll.
So we've got 10 minutes left on this topic. Want to make sure I've got anybody in the queue who hasn't spoken yet, and Senator Gordley's up next.
Yes, I would just like to address the appeal quickly. I feel very strongly about this. The appeal, city council's appeal is a poison pill in this process. I think it gets in the way of garnering trust from the public in this process. And so I'm just going to put that out there for the record. And David, I don't know what conversations you've had with the mayor and council, or what kind of, if you've tried to talk them out of it, if that's appropriate, or it just is hanging there as something that is impeding our progress, and that just needs to be acknowledged.
Well, I'm going to let it sit out there and let that stand. We are in mediation with the city, and so those conversations aren't something I can talk about. But the Department of Justice continues to stand behind this agreement and wanting to move forward, and we're in that mediation process right now.
And that also leads me to say something else. And I'm reflecting on the hearing, and I'm reflecting on what's happening in the room right now, and what I'm feeling in my body. In this city, we need a truth and reconciliation process. We are a community that is full of pain, grief, loss, unaddressed pain, loss, grief. And it's a form of mental health crisis, unaddressed. And there needs to be an opportunity created for people to speak their truth, whatever it is, their truth. And so I hope going forward, and maybe this is a role for our ecumenical organizations to help us with, to play. I'm thinking about how we go forward and how we really get to that place of healing. The other thing I'm called to say, or just moved to say, is that I have a friend, Kathleen Sadat, who says we need more love and less attitude. We need more love. We need more compassion. We need to speak to each other's hearts, you know? And so I hope that we find our way to that place. And I hope that we find our way, and I believe that we can. That's why we're here. We all believe that. But let's bring the kindness forward. Invite kindness into the room.
Yeah, Val, just a quick comment. I totally agree with you on that, and as I appreciate you. You and I have talked about this issue, and I appreciate your leadership on this, and I think that I would be happy personally to help arrange that. I know all the people around the country that are doing this kind of stuff, and so I think we could get them to come to Portland and maybe work with the leadership here, whether it's the COAB and you guys or the faith community, to make something happen that was also broad, that includes issues of race and mental health even as well. There's a lot of potential there. So I think that's a great idea. It's just my opinion.
Philip?
I have a question regarding the role of alternates, because I previously was an alternate, but now that Christy is not here, I'm taking her position for tonight temporarily. I am curious about the status of Christy and how the role of PCOD and Human Rights Commission, how their authority affects alternate status.
So, and this goes to the interpretation of the agreement. So, Ellen and I have talked about this along with her colleagues and on my colleague's side. The agreement certainly considers that among the many diverse representatives here, one person represents the Portland Commission on Disability as selected by that chair, and one person represents the Human Rights Commission as selected by that chair, and it would be a current commissioner. There is some discussion about one COAB member's status who is on the Portland Commission on Disability. My understanding is that is being worked out, whether or not she remains on that commission. Perhaps it's on the agenda tomorrow. I don't have all the information right now. But if she no longer is on the Portland Commission on Disability, then we would turn to the Portland Commission on Disability chair to identify a replacement, although we have the benefit of the alternate already being identified, which is why it's so beneficial to have the alternates, so that person can step in and then be a voting member of the COAB.
Sharon?
Thank you.
First of all, I don't know if we're at the part that's just COAB questions and comments. So I'm gonna.
Yes, we folded that all in.
I think we folded it all in. Okay. So in that spirit, two things. First of all, Senator Gordley's recommendation and her words were so perfect, powerful, and meaningful, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think that would be a type of truth and reconciliation would be a wonderful thing to see in the city of Portland. So thank you for expressing that so well. I also, just as a matter of order, I wanted to bring up for discussion and input how people feel about the public comment aspect of our meetings being 15 minutes at the end. And I'm not sure where that should be directed or not, but I feel it might be more beneficial to have people speak either not at the end, and not for 15 minutes. But
so the version that was handed out this morning, actually, you're not the first person to mention that. Brad Taylor flagged that earlier in the week, and on the version that went around, Dennis apologizes, he was going to mention that at the outset. We actually, that is the next item in 3 minutes is public comment, so that it isn't at the end.
All right. There you go. Perfect. I feel heard. Okay.
Emmanuel.
I got in a little late, but I wanted to ask. Sure. So I'm asking, what data can we, as the COAB, request from you all? I heard there was a mention of, folks cannot just go in and pull records, which is understandable, but what can we COAB request outside of what is already going to be given to us, and what is going to be given to us to review, so we don't have to come back a week later and request something that we feel like we should have had in the beginning.
I think for the COAB, in terms of requests for data from the COAB, certainly if a subcommittee or the COAB altogether decides they need some additional data to assess something, then that would be something to bring to the full COAB, and we could then go and request it if the COAB votes that that's information that they need. I think the bigger problem was just random requests from individual people for data without necessarily a process for sort of coming up with the question you want to answer, what data you'd like, and what to do with it. So if we can make a process to go through the request through the subcommittees to the COAB, if there's data that's needed, then we can go and request that from the police department.
So as long as the full body asks for that, we can have access to it?
Well, it's not necessarily.
We can have access to it.
Right, and we can ask, I mean, certainly some of the raw data, there may be issues with just publicly sharing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much our job to analyze the data. That's how we construe what we're doing here, but there's no secrets about what we're doing. So you can...
but we will be able to view that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
And in that, with the collection, how...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. With the collection of information that we get, how you eloquently express that, how likely is it that what we get from the community that we bring to you, that you give us and we take back, it could get muddled, but how likely are we able to have their voices and our voices heard and actually have it implemented instead of just talking about it and giving great ideas over and over?
Sure.
What is the real likelihood of that even being put to use?
Well, you know, who knows? So I'll answer that quickly. You know, it's an empirical question. We don't know for sure, but just to say that this is a fairly unique process here, where the community has a role and has a voice, and we want to honor and respect that, and we working together like brothers and sisters here. It's like not like we're some person that we want to work together is what I'm saying. So and the bigger point is that this is coming down from the Justice Department. They're the ultimate deciders. We will recommend to them whether the police bureau is in compliance or not with your input. If you guys think that the recommendations we made in our report to them don't add up to what you guys told us, at the next meeting we expect to hear that, you know, or at the subcommittee, whatever. So we don't want to be out of sync completely with the community saying. So to the extent that we speak with some authority, I think as independent, and you're independent, I think the city of Portland wants to listen to that. I think my understanding from the people I've interacted with in the police bureau so far, the command level and the chief, they're very open to making changes and improving the police department. They want a police department that has the respect of the community and treats people with dignity and doesn't use force when it's not necessary. So there's a long ways to go, I think, to get all that. But my short answer, we really, there's no reason why a lot of what you guys say and what we say is not going to be seriously listened to. If there's legal reasons it can't be done, if there's some other issue, we'll hear about it. So there'll be a dialogue with the Portland Police Bureau, which is why they're not only here, but the command level. I see the chief is here tonight, and I thank you for, and the commander that's responsible for all these implementations. So they're listening right now.
Just one more comment. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. We just want to make sure, as we reboot and go forward, that we have complete transparency. I don't like to feel like I'm being left out of the loop, or I have to find out from somebody else, when if we're all at the table and we're all here together, we can have a great kumbaya moment. But I don't want to have to go search and find and look for information when we are going to provide this information to basically make sure that everybody's treated with respect and dignity. And
which is why we're also changing the process of communication, so that there aren't a few emails over here and a few over there, and so-and-so's talking to so-and-so and sending emails that someone else sent to them, and this will be all you want to address that?
Actually, I'd love to give an update on that. So the website is live, cocals-coab.com. It is a work in progress. It does not have every single document on there that has been requested, but as we're gathering those, I think someone's in the process right now of taking all the feedback from the fairness hearing and uploading it there, and we have another list of requested documents to work through and post. There is a forum section. We are working on a guidelines memo for the voting members of the COAB who have access to start threads and comment on threads on that forum. I expect you will get that tomorrow, as well as information on how to set up your account there. There will also be, it may be .org, but I've gotten there through .com. Maybe we have both.
Well.
That would have been smart. We've got both, .com or .org.
So it's up and running?
What's that?
It's up and running?
It is up and running right now. If there's a document that's not on there, let the COCL know, and we'll have that queue of finding additional documents that should be in the library section of that website. And then the forum will be a place where subcommittees can have conversations that are fully transparent. There will be a thread on the forums where the public can make comments as well that's fully transparent. That will hopefully entirely diminish the email traffic, because we'll have a place where that conversation is transparent and fully accessible to everybody at your pace.
I think, do you want to do one?
So Sharon is the last person I had on the queue, and then we will get to public comment. I have one person signed up to testify. If anybody else would like to testify, please let me know.
So I just wanted for clarification. So really, the COAB, we shouldn't have been doing anything because we don't have any information coming from Department of Justice or from the COCL, right? Is that what I'm understanding? Or the information that we're to review basically was put up on the website, and then we can send all of our questions to the COCL. But then within our subcommittees, we're supposed to be working on reviewing the information as a group. And so for us to be able to communicate within our subcommittees, it's a little confusing.
Well,
I'm confused.
I would like to just add to that you know, in addition to waiting for things that we're producing, which it's taking time because this is, you know, slow and getting going. The rabbi summarized it well. Seeking information from the community in various ways, the subcommittees, especially the outreach subcommittee, can certainly begin to explore the kinds of issues that this group brought up at the last meeting about how do you get input from persons who are houseless, and how do you get input from the LBGT community, how do you get input from the African American community, and the Latino community are somewhat represented in the big survey, but we've asked also for feedback from that survey, and a couple of you have given us suggestions about questions that should be added or changed, so we appreciate that. So there's some things going on there, and then the planning of the next meeting, the planning of the next public hearing and what that needs to look like this time so it's better received. So there's various things like that, and maybe the subcommittees have other things they're working on. The data elements, we want to talk with the data committee on the kinds of things that we have a list of things, and maybe there's other things that you guys think that we should be requesting.
So with that, we're going to move into public comment. I have on the parking lot that we should have a microphone for future meetings for the public comment. For now, though, as your name is called, if you could move close enough to the table that the table microphones pick you up for the recording, please do that. I have first on the list Jeannie Reuter. Then we have Joanne Hardesty and Bridget Donegan and Jennifer Rodriguez. I think the group had decided at the last meeting that 3 minutes was the right amount of time to speak. So I've got a timer here, and we should have plenty of time. So Jeannie Reuter, you are up first. All right, Dan, I've got you on the list.
I'd like to make a request as far as following up for intimidation and retaliation, that it be taken seriously. I'm a former police officer from Colorado. I turned in a supervisor for beating up a prisoner in handcuffs. I ended up renting, and I didn't say it in court. I testified in writing, and I testified orally on February the 18th. I didn't say it because I was thinking it probably wasn't a good thing to do, but I did end up winning a letter of recommendation and an apology and 6 figures. I wasn't going to say that in a group of people that I did not know. My life was turned upside down, as well as with my family members. I can tell you that a police officer who speaks out gets bulldozed. I was bulldozed so badly I knew I had no choice but to leave the state, and I did, and I came here. I ended up going dormant on it as far as I worked Marion County Corrections at the Restitution Center. I have great respect for law enforcement when it's done and it's done right, and for treating citizens appropriately. But I can tell you that I've gotten sat on just for demonstrating with poor Hispanic people and for their rights in Salem. And there's retaliation that's done. And somebody kicked in the back door of my house on February the 19th. It was within 24 hours of my testimony. And it's my personal feeling that it was in retaliation for my testimony. Someone didn't like it. Someone carried the news back to Salem. I don't know who. And I ended up getting nailed. It was a lot of damage. It was a lot of damage to me. It was more than $1,000. I had more than $10,000 in savings bonds stolen. I got most of them back. But I still don't know who kicked in the door of my house. But I can tell you that anybody who speaks out against police, I listened to a speaker at Lewis and Clark last night, and with his testimony on with what happened to him, no one likes to have a mirror shown on them. And I don't like reading it in the paper when IPR is trying to do their investigations, and 3 of their investigators end up being harassed. And just as a simple thing, there was a Hispanic lady at the end of the public comments during the meeting, I see. And why can't you follow up with just a plain and simple person like that, whose testimony that you can verify about a tow truck driver and her son being arrested, or whatever the story was, and just meaningfully take care of her people that way? Thank you.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of this group. I think tonight one of the things I'd like you to consider is how you get your training. With all due respect to the DOJ and to the city of Portland, this is not my parents' Department of Justice. When I was a kid and watched people looking like me being brutalized every day, when the Department of Justice came to town, change happened. I'm not sure what this Department of Justice does, but I can tell you that if not for the AMA Coalition and many other community groups, we would not be in this room today. What's happening nationally isn't happening because the Department of Justice stepped up to the plate. It's happening because community members decided enough is enough. So my request to you as COAB members is, please, when you get training, please ask the community group who invited the Department of Justice to town to assist with your training. Because I suspect our perspective would be a little bit different than the Department of Justice, and I suspect it would be a little bit different than the city of Portland. The people who have been on the ground in this community for almost 30 years fighting for police accountability will not be silenced. And we're not going to be silenced because we got big time contractors from Chicago or that we have DOJ in the room. And so what I encourage you to do as the independent community representatives is to invite the community to come and help you train. This process has been way too city-centric, and the city has a whole different perspective than the community does. So thank you for your time.
Bridget Donegan.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the vice chair of the Citizen Review Committee. Our chair, Mae Wilson, is here too. I know that she introduced herself to all maybe a couple meetings ago. I just wanted to let you all know that we're here. We hope that as you start getting the massive amounts of information and getting your training, that some of you come to some of our meetings or pay attention to some of the things that we're doing. We do a lot of community outreach. We have a long time working relationship, not only with IPR, but with internal affairs, with a lot of people in training, a lot of people at the Bureau. It took us a lot of years because there's inherent tension there. But we have gone through some of the growing pains that you're going through, different contexts, but we might have valuable things to offer. So I hope that some of you think about reaching out to us, coming to our meetings, seeing what we're doing, and we'll keep following you all. I'm personally really excited for the amount of data that's going to come out of this process, and I hope that you can all get past some of the organizational struggles that you're having to really make productive use of the incredible opportunity that this is. It's really an honor, I think, that the community has this big of a seat at the table, and it's not just a DOJ monitor that comes into town, because that would normally be the case. So I'm really excited, and we'll see you all around. Thanks.
Jennifer Rodriguez.
Definitely not going to be able to hear you back there.
Hold on.
Wait, nobody can hear you.
Yeah, come on.
She doesn't. Did you hear her? She doesn't want to be filmed.
She doesn't want to be filmed.
She doesn't want to be filmed.
Do you want to be heard?
Mm-hmm.
Police told her she should really leave it. She stated she would never call the police again. If it were not for her speaking out, I wouldn't have had the courage to come forward either. Vast majority of Hispanic population in the Portland area are afraid to call the police. There has been some discussion among policymakers about the lack of police in rural parts of Oregon. There are 500,000 Hispanic people in Oregon, that is 500,000 people who are in Oregon, the majority of which do not feel they have any police protection or even the right to call the police for any reason, whether they speak Spanish or English. Not providing essential services such as police protection to an entire culture of people does not help improve a city. I am perpetually threatened by white people in Portland. I'm routinely denied services and often targeted and physically injured as part of a direct targeting campaign towards Latinos. It is not because I don't speak English or that I'm not from Oregon. I'm targeted because of my ethnicity. There's an extreme amount of racial violence aimed towards Latinos, and the police intentionally and systematically ignore it, which in a way only enforces and assures that it will happen. I've experienced so much racial targeting in Oregon. It's almost unbelievable. I've had toxic chemicals thrown on my clothing intentionally, which caused nerve damage. I've had my ribs fractured by a stranger. I've been punched in the chest by a stranger, causing spinal injury. And I haven't called the police because I know they will threaten and intimidate me with arrest if I were to attempt to press charges against people who have hurt me. By ignoring extreme violence, Portland Police, the City Council, and other leaders in this area are creating an even more violent and dangerous city and creating a bleak future for everyone. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Dan Handelman.
And I really appreciate that kind of testimony you just heard, because you need to keep it real and not just talk about statistics, and remember the individuals who are being affected by these policies that you're talking about. there are a bunch of stuff I want to get to, and I think that if you have public comment in the middle of the meeting or the end of the meeting, people should be able to defer part of their time to the end if they'd like to. That would be my preference in some times. We worked very hard when the agreement was being put together to make sure that the COCL would not have a vote. When it was the agreement was first put out there, the COCL was going to have a vote, and we just predicted that was going to cause a problem. At this point, it seems like the COCL has veto power anyway, and I think we need to think about the power dynamics between the paid staff and the volunteer members of the groups like this group and like the CRC. I think it was interesting they brought up there's a parallel in how our community members are put down and disempowered by the power structure. And I'm glad you're standing up for yourselves to the point that you can. I'm hoping that you're going to invite your alternates to speak at least before you finish a discussion. Just say, does the alternates have anything to answer if they're not going to be allowed to sit at the table by a fiat that was declared by other people and not by the group that gets to vote on how they're going to run their meetings. There's an IPR ordinance. I mentioned this at your last meeting or the meeting before, that there's changes that are coming down that have to do with the agreement. I think not only for this, but for other things like the directives that are coming out this month, the directives have to do with the oversight system and mental health issues, that you should have input to the police now instead of waiting for them to make bad changes and come back later and say, well, why didn't you do it that way? So the IPR, I don't know if I see the directors here. I know they're having a community meeting on the 21st. I really hope the COAD members will put their opinions in about that. And regarding independent counsel, I want to make it really clear that our organization, when we sent our letter, we never said that the city attorney can't address your group. We just said the city attorney has a conflict of interest when they address your group. And we feel that you should still consider the idea of independent legal counsel because of that conflict of interest that exists. And that brings me to another point, that the memos that have come out are talking about community outside agitators and people who wrote letters and this and that. It's very confusing to know if we're being accused of these things as an organization because our name's not being used. So I feel like as a group that's been around for 23 years and talked to hundreds of people who have been hurt by the police and trained hundreds of people on what their rights are, that we should have a voice when you're asking for input from the community, and we shouldn't be sidelined. And I have a bunch more, and I'll type it up and send it to you later. Thank you.
That's everyone I have on my list. With that, we are on a break. I'm sorry? There's somebody else? Great. Thank you. What's your name?
My name's John Campbell. I told Dennis I wasn't the same thing, but I listened to the conversation. I thought I would just offer. I just want to offer structurally. I looked up in the agreement. There are 6 things this committee is supposed to be doing. And you don't need empowerment from the COCL or from the Department of Justice to do it. It's 6 things. It's independently assess the implementation of the agreement, make recommendations to the parties on additional action, advise the Chief and Police Commissioner on strategies. There's been recommendations of that. Provide the community information on the agreement, contribute to the development and implementation of the community engagement plan, and receive public comments and concerns. And I think if you just posted those 6 things, that's in paragraph 141. Just post them at the beginning. You can keep yourself focused on it. Now, it's a classic legal agreement, so then it overlays with all these deadlines you got to meet that makes it really hard to focus on those 6 things. But if you're looking at the thing within those 6 things, you have the power to act. You have the power to make recommendations independently about actions. You have the power to assess implementation of the agreement and do that independently. Obviously, you don't do it individually. You do it with each other. But I think it could help focus the committee if you had those 6 things up every time you meet as a committee and say, are we talking are we on track with these things? Because you have a lot of power within that, and keeping focused on those things I think could be tremendous. There's more to that, but it was just a simple thought. Just, you don't need anyone to interpret it. You got those 6 things, you're empowered to do it, and take it from there, I guess is what I would say. So I just wanted to encourage that from a structural standpoint.
With that, we are on break until 7:15, and we will come back to elect an executive committee. I'm going to start talking. So over the last few days, I've connected with most members of the COAB to preview the executive committee selection process. got a lot of good feedback there, and I think consensus that this is a streamlined way to have an executive committee 10 minutes from now so that we can move forward with a lot of the important work that that group needs to do. So in the spirit of the conversation that this group had at the last meeting about having a representative executive committee, I've put together, and Brad is passing out, a 5-seat executive committee with 1 member coming through each avenue through which voting members of the COAB were selected. So there will end up being 1 member from the 5 appointed by the City Council, 1 member of the 5 appointed by the Selection Committee, 1 member of the 3 jointly appointed by PCOD and HRC from applicants, then the PCOD commissioner role and the HRC commissioner role. So the ballot you have in front of you has the COAB voting members who have self-nominated into those slots. So for the Selection Committee, we have Jimmy Johnson, Corey Murphy, and Sharon Maxwell. For the City Council appointees, we have Rabbi Kahana and Senator Gordley. The HRC PCOD joint appointees, we have Bud Thewlis. Our HRC commissioner is Emmanuel Price, and our PCOD commissioner, as we heard earlier, is a bit in flux, but that would be the seat for either Christy or Philip once that's resolved. I do want to take a moment to see if anyone has changed their mind and either would like to be added to this list or removed from this list. Corey?
So at this time, understanding how the selection will take place through this particular process, I would like to remove my name from this list.
Right.
And I took accountability for that because I wanted to make sure that there were enough people that were available for this process. But I think that the candidates that we have are both very good candidates in order to come from the selection committee. And I would not want to take away anyone else's ability to support those 2 folks. So
Thank you,
with
Corey.
that, I will withdraw.
So if everyone could cross off Corey's name on their ballot. And then would anybody else like to either add or remove themselves? So in accordance with public meetings rules, your name is on your ballot. What I'd like to take the next moment or 2 to do is in the 2 categories where there are multiple candidates, if you could circle your selection and pass those forward. Brad and I will quickly make a tally. The nominee with the most votes will become the nominee for that slate of 5, and then we'll need to make a motion to ratify and accept that as our executive committee.
We should pick them up, actually.
Great.
Tom's going to go around this way and pick up your ballots.
You can pass them in.
Just hold them up and somebody will.
What's our next item? Okay. Great. Can I take what you've got started? Thank you.
Are there other people out there that should be voting?
We will find out.
Yeah. Here it comes. Manuel's coming back. So anybody, is there any other voters out there?
She
Okay.
did it.
She's voted already. Okay.
Correct. Because it's a
Right.
public meeting.
It
It is public, yes.
Sorry, I'm sitting so close. I keep my head keeps appearing on the screen.
Thank you for your patience. Do I have everybody's? All right, so very, very close, but Sharon Maxwell emerged as the candidate for the selection committee and Senator Gordley for the city council appointees, which would make the full slate Sharon Maxwell, Avell Gordley, Bud Fulis, Emmanuel Price, and the PCOD commissioner. Would someone like to move to elect this slate as your executive committee?
So moved.
Corey moved. Seconded? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes. We have an executive committee. Amy Watson is at PSU.
So at the last meeting on March 12th, we asked the COAB to recommend to the City of Portland hire Portland State to do the annual community survey, the police services, and the affiliated partner survey. And at that time, the COAB voted in favor of the motion with 7 yes, 4 no, 2 abstain, and I believe 2 people were not present. So later there was a question that was raised on whether this was a major or a minor action and if 8 votes were required to pass it. So instead of arguing those points, we decided it would be best just to have a second vote at this meeting. That way it would be the most transparent. So what we'd like to do right now is just to kind of remind you that from the settlement, the city is responsible for conducting the survey and seeking the advice of the COAB on that matter. And the COCO is working with the city and the COAB. We have years of survey experience, and we hope to be able to assist in the survey design and the analysis and write-up of the data. The reason why we picked Portland State is because they are skilled researchers, and they did the previous survey, and we're aware that there were some concerns about that previous survey, but their methods were sound. What we'd like to do this time is to make sure that we have the questions that people want on there, that the oversampling is done the way that the COAB and COCO recommend, to make sure that we get African Americans, Latinos, youth. Some other subgroups that are vulnerable, that are very relevant to the focus of the settlement, are a little bit harder to reach in a survey like this. And we know that we'll have to use other approaches. So the community survey is really to get a broad sample of the community in general. To reach some of the harder to reach groups, we have plans to do things like focus groups and interviews and other types of way to reach those communities. It's just not possible to do with the type of sampling and a mail survey for the broader community survey. We would like to, however, be able to do some comparisons to some of the questions that are going to be retained from the earlier survey, so we can track progress over time. We did get an extra 60 days extension from the Department of Justice so that we could take the time to actually get this into the field correctly and make sure we had the COAB feedback on it as well. And we're aware that there's some issues of trust in terms of trust between the COCO and the COAB and the community. We really do see this as an important project, and we're researchers. It's not really, there's not much point doing and collecting the data unless we're going to do it with integrity and an ethically and methodologically sound approach. And so that's very important to us, and we hope that we can build that trust with this group over time. And we have a great deal of experience doing these types of surveys, as well as doing some of the data collection when we move to trying to get some of the harder to reach portions of the community. We also don't have, Dennis has talked before, we don't have significant connections or relationships with the city or PPB or PSU to the point where we have any motivation to just go in and do this to make them look good. We really want to come up and get good data that's useful to the community, that's useful to the city and to the police bureau. So what we'd like to do is make a motion for a revote on the survey, that we want the city-wide survey to really be based on a representative random sample of Portland residents with oversampling of African Americans, Latinos, and youth, so they can be large enough to, those groups can be large enough to produce reliable estimates. And again, I want to reiterate that this is only one piece of the collection of data that we'll do to really look at how, to look at the community's perception of how they're treated and what the relationship is with the Portland Police Bureau. And finally, what we do want to reiterate as well is while we recommend that we use the Portland State Group to, so we can use their sampling methods and have them collect the data, we, in collaboration with the COAB and the city, are telling them what data to collect. So what are the questions to ask, and then we will do the analysis and write-up of the data so that really, we'll get your feedback, we'll write it up, we'll do the analysis, and then we'll bring it to you to get your perspectives on it as well. So we just wanted to reiterate that. So we'd like to make a motion for revote on the topic. Can we make a motion? Can we make
All right, Avel, Corey, Sharon. It hasn't. I think she was asking if someone has a motion.
No, that's not what she said.
I misspoke. I apologize for that.
That's what I want to clarify
Got it.
for the record, in terms of process.
Sure.
Okay, going forward. You're seeking a motion.
We're seeking a motion, yes, that's correct.
Corey?
Clarify the groups you seek to sample in the survey again, please.
The idea is it's a random sample of the Portland community with oversampling of African Americans, Latinos, and youth. Some other groups that will be important to do outreach and get their perspectives on can't be sampled in, there's not a list of certain people that might belong or identify with certain groups for us to pull a sample from. So we'll have to use different approaches to get to other groups in the community. So it's designed to be representative of the community at large, but we acknowledge that we'll have to do extra work in different methods to get to other sectors of the community.
Point of clarification. So you're saying that the groups that you have, that you just listed there, are the ones that are the only feasible groups that you can get data from in a community survey?
We can get data from other groups, we just can't sample specifically other groups. So we may send the mail to a random sample, which may include members of various groups.
Sure.
But in terms of oversampling with this type of survey, there's not a list that we can pull names from to send the letter to that indicate different
groups like persons houseless, gay and lesbian community, persons with mental health crises. So it's a random probability sample, which, if drawn properly, allows you to estimate exactly how the whole city feels and how those three subgroups feel. That's all it can do, actually. It can't do anything more.
Sure, and if I could, so we can agree or disagree on the methodology of which groups you can and cannot include. My concern is for the groups that we're not including in the motion that you're seeking, what then is your impetus to include those other key demographics that also have experienced harassment and or intimidation and other actions or behaviors by the police, which they're certainly trying to work on fixing, but have traditionally been people who have suffered like that?
I think our plan is, in order to really assess compliance with the settlement agreement, we would need to get data from people that might not show up as easily in the community survey. We will need to do things to do outreach and do focus groups, and actually go to the COAB to get suggestions on accessing members of those groups that would have really important feedback to give. It's not possible to do it in the general community survey. So we have to take other steps to get that information.
Oh, one more clarification. There is another survey plan, though, of persons who have had a recent contact with the police in a mental health crisis situation. So we intend to actually pursue that sample over time. That data comes from the police, a letter to them somehow, and we've used a methodology like that in other cities. And so that group will be captured. As well as another group, I should say, within that random probability sample of the whole city, there'll be a subgroup of people who said they had contact with the police in the last year. That's, in most cities we do, that's probably about 1 in 5, but at least gives you enough of them that you can also see how they were treated relative to the rest of the group.
So I have Sharon, then Vive, and Emmanuel.
I guess my question is just around method and approach based
the information through the surveys to these communities based on what we even experienced at the hearing, in that we were right in the middle of the New Columbia, and did not see that the people that lived right there, that could walk right across the street and come in, felt comfortable enough, or that we were able to get them even there because they didn't show up. And so when you're saying you're gonna go out and do the survey, what different style of method to really get a real inclusive response is gonna happen?
In terms of the other methods, I mean, that would be one thing that we would really want to work with the COAB on, and the places where we could do the outreach. Sometimes it's going to faith communities and asking for feedback. Places where people go where they might feel safe talking. In terms of trying to, working with people that are houseless, there's other ways of then going out and finding people and inviting them to provide the feedback. So it depends on the group, and I think we can get a lot of good information from the COAB members too, of the groups of where and how would be the best way to actually engage people and provide a safe place for them to provide that feedback.
V?
I just want to keep things simple, or as simple as possible. So when I go shopping, like when I go shopping for tea, I want to be able to pick from as many teas as possible because that's just the way I am. But sometimes when I go shopping for soda, I'd like to pick the difference between Coke or Pepsi, or Naked or Odwalla, right? So my question is, how come the COAB wasn't given an opportunity to do some shopping?
Well, we got, this is a survey to be done by the city in consultation with the COAB, and the COCL being an instrumental role in doing this kind of work. And given that we had to are responsible for measuring the effect on public trust in the police over time, we want to have a significant input in this. I'm also, I shouldn't be talking probably, but I feel like, well, I just want to say that I think that we are asking for your input right now. I mean, why weren't there other groups involved? I guess this is an area, I'll be honest with you, we were asking you to trust us on this. If you don't want to, it's up to you guys to decide. We're only making a recommendation to the city. If you don't want to go forward with this, I think there's doctors in the rooms, lawyers, various professions who I've been doing surveys like this for 35 years. So I'm also asking you, I guess, to trust us that we now the one thing that I heard several people say was Portland State, their data might be accurate, which I argued it was, but their write-ups were somewhat lacking in some ways. We're promising to write up the whole report and write the data and analyze the data. So, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, and the answer is because we advised that of the people around here that had some experience with criminal justice, that understood the concepts of procedural justice, legitimacy, use of force, and had measured it before, they were the only group that we knew of around here, and that we thought that some of that earlier data was good enough to replicate, and so it's just our recommendation.
So would it be okay with you guys if we did a little shopping?
It's up to we wanted to bring this motion back, and if you guys decide you don't want to do it, we will advise the city that that's your decision, and then it's up to the city to figure out, according to if we're playing by the rules here, it's up to the city to decide on these matters. And so I think I think that's the question after the vote, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
I just had another question.
Yeah.
There was just some concern from community members that the previous Portland State, and that the fact that they have an ongoing agreement with the city, that it could be biased in how that the information is collected, how it's written, and the fact that we are the COAB, and so we should get an opportunity to speak to how the survey is being done and who's doing it, and that's the whole reason for the advisement, right? And so with it already being established that that's who you're gonna go with, thank you, Dennis, for saying that, you know, you want it to be honest, but that's what we need to hear from you, is why you thought that in the beginning, but then we need to be able to have our say and speak to why we feel as the community that we want to go a different direction, because if that was the case, we would already have been there, but because we're not, we need to do something different.
All right, Emmanuel, Senator Gordley, Philip, Jimmy, Corey.
All right, I'm pretty much in agreement with everybody. I do feel like the COAB, we should have a selection of tea to see whether we like Moroccan or whether we like chai tea. Also, I think that we have so much richness in the room around the table where we should, how this board is made up of Black, white, Latino, gay, straight, lesbian, so on and so forth. I think we should be able to pull, if not from the board, but at least from the community, the people that we want to oversample and get the stats and data we need. Also, Ime has also done surveys. I'm sorry to put you on the spot right now, but I remember her saying she's done surveys, so we should also lean to what we have already and link to her expertise as well as yours, so we can collect the right data. Also, and I think we just capture that. If we have, you know, individuals who the people that we're looking to get the data from, why not include them? I think it would have a bigger impact to have more community involved. You get more trust, you build more relationships with the community and us as a whole. If we include them in on the survey, if we have people from Northeast go to Northeast, or folks who live in East Portland go to East Portland and talk to the Latino and the Black population out there, it only makes sense. And that's why there's a lack of trust here.
So I feel I need to address that. So we are absolutely fine with that. In fact, we are encouraging that. We think the COAB, again, back to the way the rabbi here has summarized the whole thing, you know, to do that work. And the survey itself could be used by individual members of COAB to have focus groups and to talk with people and to reach out, pass out surveys. But as a social scientist, I'm going to tell you that can't be part of this random citywide sample, because it's not random. So only this sample is used for this purpose. So the survey that we're talking about here cannot serve all purposes. It just can't. So, but we strongly encourage you to do those other things, and to get all the voices you can.
Not to,
Yeah.
go back and forth,
Yeah.
but you engage me, so
Yeah.
the survey that, I forgot what you just said, but in other words,
The citywide survey?
Yeah, the citywide survey. Like, shouldn't we be including that, or shouldn't we at least have a choice of what we would like to see?
You mean other surveys, or?
You said something about like the city survey. If you could repeat that, I think it would help
Well,
me
this-
clarify what I'm.
Yeah, it has to be random. So what happens, the way it works is we look at all the addresses from the Census Bureau for all these areas of the city, and the addresses are actually randomly selected by a computer-generated random numbers generator. So that's the only way that you can then say that Portland people feel this way. Otherwise, you can't. When you guys pass things out to people, that's a biased sample. It's only people you know. It's in this part of town, that part of town. We can make an attempt to reach the African American and Latino communities because they represent 6 and 9% of the city, and it's a pretty big number, and we kind of know where they live, but even though they're spread out, and we oversample all those areas. So but some groups that are smaller or don't have a list of members, you know, are hard to reach. Now, if the deaf community, for example, if there's a list of people that the survey could be sent to, fine, let's send it to them. So there's a lot of, you know, this is all open for discussion. It's just a different, should we hire this group to just collect this data for this one purpose? That's the only question I think right now.
Yeah. And
but
one more
yeah.
point. On the folks who are doing the survey, whomever, is it all white? Is it all brown? Is it all men? What does that look like?
It's mailed.
Are there any LGBTQ, any deaf folks, any mentally ill folks, any persons
On the PSU team?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's something that we think you should know, though.
Well,
excuse me.
I do want to say that if this group feels, and the problem with, I'm into random samples, so it's like, yeah, I don't know if the people speaking represent the whole group or not, but if the group feels that this is something they don't want to do, let's just vote on it, for or against. Take all the point. I'm going to stop talking and let the people who want.
I'm not going to intervene except for just to read from the agreement, and I hope that all of you carry it with you the way we do. The city, in consultation with COAB, will conduct a reliable, comprehensive, and representative survey of members of the Portland community. So the city does it, but they need to consult with you broadly. And then second, there are other parts of the agreement that talk about the COAB in conjunction with PPB, gathering public input on PPB's outreach, including the representative survey described above, but many other ways that you should be gathering public input as well.
And last thing, we are open to having other people do the survey. I just want to be absolutely clear about that.
I guess my question.
Sorry, I'll add you to the list. Senator Gordley's up next.
Did you want to finish your point? No. Okay. When you said the word reliable, yeah, reliable. And I like Guayaki, your name, by the way. An overarching issue here is trust. And while I voted in support of the PSU survey the last time around, I don't think I can do that this time because several things. One, I heard there was public testimony last time that said there are alternatives out there. Now, I don't know if anyone has come forward with alternatives. I've not been presented with any. But then John Campbell's in the room. He doesn't know I'm going to say this, but John Campbell of Campbell DeLong, that's an alternative. And so I just want to say that Emmanuel's point about having a choice is something I feel I want to do, is have a choice. Because again, I'm concerned about trust, gaining the community's trust in this process going forward.
Philip, Jimmy, Corey.
I definitely have concerns as well, and I really think that the state of Oregon is very varied. But in Portland, I'm not sure what the variety is and of people who have access to the internet. I have the resources. I have connections. I have connections to the internet. But my question is that how are you approaching this survey with others? How will you communicate with others? And it's clear that there are going to be these issues that come up, and therefore trust can't automatically be assumed. So, other people need to have a voice. So I just have concerns about how the survey is conducted. But as COAB members, I think their request here tonight is simply that they want us to vote on if we would like to keep PSU running the survey or if we would prefer to have another option. So if we would like PSU to vote, then we could vote for that. But if we would like added time for discussion or added time for changes, then we can vote against it. I think they understand our concerns in general, and the request now is for a vote.
Well, my thought was early on, kind of a little bit, but I thought if we were using PSU, or if we using anybody for that matter, I would like to see COAB be definitely in the write-up part, be in the survey throughout, but definitely be there as the statements, as the comments are being written up, as the survey is being written up. I want our language. I want the language to be there from COAB that needs to be there. So no matter what people we use, and I'm okay. I'm okay with I don't know about Portland State. I've had a lot of reservations about Portland State. But if we're there writing it up, if we're there every step of the way as far as the survey goes, somebody from our team or COAB, I'm open. That's all I have to say.
Corey, then Sharon, then Sharon.
So just quickly, I just want to say I'd like to colloquy with my COAB member here because I feel like maybe somebody isn't responding to my question. So my question isn't about whether or not Portland State is fit to do it, although I think that is a very good question. My question is about propriety. And when you tell me you can't find 10% of the population, and that because 10% of that population lives, there are LGBTQ people who are black, who are white, who are Asian, who are Latino, and I have a little bit of a problem when you tell me what sounds like, and I'm asking my esteemed colleague, that we just won't choose to do your survey if you want to add these people to it, because that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
I'm willing to vote. Can I finish? Thank you. I'm willing to vote for this proposal, but I will not participate in a methodology that says that this city in particular, that Portland, where we have had so much rich diversity and the intersectional piece that goes with the restorative justice that needs to happen for everyone, if that is not part of it, then I'm sure there's an alternate that needs my name tag. So that's just how I feel about it. I'll let it go, but I'm all for us moving forward with getting a survey team, but you can't tell me that. I just does that sound reasonable to you?
Totally.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think the difficulty isn't actually finding people from the LGBT community, because certainly, if it goes out on a random sample, there can be a question on there so that we can do analysis by that. But we can't stratify a sample based on that status because there's not a list of addresses that would allow us to do that. It's not that we can't find people to ask them questions, and we do plan to do that. We just can't stratify this type of sample on that particular variable. So,
So you just said earlier that if you needed a list of deaf people, you could work with organizations to get such a list, right? So I would assume you've heard of Basic Rights Oregon, you've heard of CAP, you've heard of Pride Northwest, all organizations that can help you do that outreach and help you get that sort of information. So I just want to put that out there.
Sharon?
And I guess what I was trying to really be clear with is that historically, when you're saying you're getting a random sample and expecting people to mail this back in, that just seems like you're not going to get a response from people who have been marginalized or don't feel that it's important, especially when it comes to all of the communities of color and even just around the whole trust piece. So I really want to see that if it's random, that there is some specific target to organizations that are working with these type of groups to make sure that you can go directly to them and target them, that the organization will work with the people to be able to fill out the surveys so that you're going to get them returned, because I just don't feel like we're going to get back enough information based on even the first hearing. I don't know. I just don't feel like we're going to get what we're looking for, period, if we don't be more targeted.
I think that
there are two separate things that we're looking at, and then need to decide something with regard to one of those things. The first is that it is a given we'll be doing outreach and getting information back from all different communities. I think that's, there's a specific, whether it's a subcommittee or a committee, whatever you call it, that's dedicated to that. And I think all of the COAB wants to be as inclusive as possible and get information back from everyone. So I think that will be addressed. The separate question about the survey, which is just the larger sort of random sample, people their PhD, I don't even know, in survey methodology, and it is so specific, and doing a random sample so that it is unbiased requires consideration of all of the types of things that you're talking about and that everyone here is talking about. So in constructing the survey itself, this type of thing will be taken into account. The question apart from that, so the methodology will need to be pristine. I think there's one separate issue of trust. And you can have the most pristine methodology in the world, and if you don't trust the organization that's doing it, then it really doesn't matter, because you're not going to trust the result. And so what we need to decide here is, PSU, I mean, I think they're probably pretty good methodologically, but I think that it is important to have different groups that we can select from for this one aspect of getting all of our input, and so that we can make an informed decision, because to be honest, I've heard things with PSU research methodology, so that I wouldn't necessarily select them if there were other options. So I think getting that brought back to the group in some way to make an informed decision is important, but that's what we're deciding is yes or no PSU, and if not PSU, then who?
So I have V, Alicia, Rebecca, Hannah, Philip.
Luckily, I like to shop. So I went to the DOJ website, and I found out that they have partners, and this all stems from President Obama's executive order for the 21st century building trust and building trust in communities. And then I found out that they have their justice partners, and one of those partners is the Diagnostic Center, and they can do much more than this survey. So I think hopefully at some point, and I have to implore the chair that it's 13 minutes past on the agenda item.
Well, quick note to that. So with the public comment period moving, this item we're on until 7:55, which is in 1 minute. But Dennis, I think, is going to skip the next item, which would give us until 8:05 on this item.
So then the other point, that besides the assumptive value of just going with the CJPRI, but rather a more technical point, but maybe an important one to consider, is the matter of, and maybe it needs to be clarified from the DOJ, the matter of whether or not this is a major or a minor item. So to me, like paper clips or 6 of these legal pads, I like to keep things simple, are minor items, but if I had $88,000 or $82,500 or whatever that is of legal pads, then maybe that would be a major item. In which case, as logic flows, then this shouldn't even be up for discussion.
Yeah, so I would just, I think that, I think we all agree that sort of the inputs haven't necessarily matched the outputs, so we need to reevaluate the decision. And so my recommendation would be the same as I made at the last meeting on this, would be that there's a subcommittee that was developed to talk about this very issue of surveys, and it might be a more judicious use of everybody's time to have the subcommittee go back to have a very thorough conversation to talk about what the potential alternatives could be to surveying. I don't think anyone disagrees that we want to handle the trust. We've seen that from our representative here from the DOJ that the timeline has been shifted, and there's also a little bit more flexibility, is what I'm hearing. And so if that is the case, then we have a little bit more time to be thoughtful. And so V, if you've done research, I've gotten some recommendations from community members about PSU may not be a fully, we may not have to fully abandon that idea. There are some other more culturally specific researchers at Portland State who could potentially help with the work. So I think that this would be best taken up. I'm not sure that our vote tonight should be on whether or not it should be PSU or not, but there should probably be another motion to sort of
take this back to the subcommittees, have them come back to this body with some specific recommendations for alternatives with a brief presentation on why they are making that recommendation and having us to consider that. Because it sounds like we have time. Because I think we're all in agreement that there are parts and aspects of it that we want to see included, and we're not going to resolve all of those issues right here at this table tonight, but I think if we can be more thoughtful in the context of a subcommittee, that might be more helpful.
That's what we had planned to do on the 16th, to work on that.
So was that a motion, Felicia?
I'll second it.
Yes, it is.
So I get it down, could you state it in a motion?
So I move that we table the discussion on votes for PSU or not, that we or we suspend that discussion, and that we, as a body, take it to the subcommittee and allow the subcommittee on surveys and community engagement to come before this committee, the larger COAB, at the next meeting with a recommendation for alternative options for survey leaders, whatever.
With a recommendation on alternatives for the survey?
Alternatives for the, or who would lead this survey effort.
This is just a point of order, acting as your sort of advisor and parliamentarian. If you recommend that the subcommittee actually make a recommendation to you, then the subcommittee is a public body that would be subject to the public meetings law. So if you what you really want the subcommittee to do is investigate and come back with alternatives, I might suggest that your motion be that the individual members of the subcommittee come and share information with you as opposed to a recommendation.
Okay, so information. So is this an issue of semantics, or?
I think it is an issue of semantics. It's the word recommendation.
Okay, so we strike I move we strike recommendation and put, what was the?
With information.
With information. Thank you.
Yes.
Information sharing. So maybe perhaps we should also have a key for words that we can use in terms of making motions as well.
That's the train.
No, I'm
All right, moved and seconded, any
There you go, girl.
I would just like to ask if you could add an amendment that any decision on the survey, excuse me, that the organization that we hire make the presentation to us as a group before we vote on the group. No offense to your presentation, but I think we need to hear from them directly. If it's PSU, I think they should be making the presentation on their methodology. It's a little unfair for you to have to say what ultimately they're going to do.
Yeah. It's still all just advisory to the city whose responsibility is to do this. In fact, we'll defer to the
But are they
COAB.
going to vote before this committee meets again? Is the city, because the city council had on the agenda last week. Is it going back to the agenda?
On May 9th or 12th or whatever?
No, we took
The
that off.
Community Outreach Committee, I believe, meets on April 16th.
Yeah.
And with the 60-day extension, there should be plenty of time to bring this back to the next COAB meeting.
Yes. Yes, that was the.
And I believe at the last COAB meeting, the group had actually opted to start meeting twice a month, which is something the executive committee will need to take up to schedule that second meeting, whether that's on the fourth Thursday or whatever. But yes, I think there's ample time to have the meetings. So to clarify, did you accept the friendly amendment or no?
I wasn't really sure. I'm sorry.
He wants the research.
For the presentations.
To come and to present. I that's fine. Sure.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
So multiple candidates or just one?
I think we'll come find out what we come back with,
I
but
see.
ultimately, before we vote, I think that we need to have a presentation from the organization directly.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be added to the motion, but I'm not going to argue that.
Okay. And that was seconded?
Second.
I said it would have to be multiple presentations if the subcommittee is not making a recommendation.
Any discussion on the motion? I did still have Philip on the list.
Did anybody second the motion?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Right.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
I need to make one comment about this. So the subcommittee, I assume it's the outreach committee that's gonna?
Yes, and we're meeting on
Yeah.
the 16th, the
Yes.
location to be announced, so.
Okay,
we're still
and
looking.
please make sure, a couple things. We actually volunteered to take on more responsibility for this because of the perceived deficit that Portland State had, which is writing about this.
Okay.
So we would like whoever you recommend to the city to hire to actually write the report, maybe with your help, that's fine. But we don't want to, we have to be, we can help, but we don't, that was something that's not in the original statement. But the other thing is, remember also, make sure that whoever you invite to, that they do the partnership survey, which they don't have to.
But
That's
is
something.
that something we need to discuss
You
right
can
now?
discuss that in the group. No.
Yeah.
Right. But you want to.
I'm sorry, there's a lot of. It's just information sharing. It's not
Okay.
even a recommendation at this point. It's just information sharing.
Oh, I see. Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But that'd be.
With regards to the vote, I heard a member of the public ask if we were counting votes. And I just want to be clear that the record will show that that was a unanimous vote.
Why don't we do a show of hands to make sure that we do get it and keep them up while Jonah, who's taking our minutes over here, gets it. I can read. I can say the names. Rabbi Kahana, Emmanuel Price, Philip Wolf, Catherine Gardner, Jimmy Johnson, Sharon Mirren, Alicia Moreland Capuya, Sharon Maxwell, Corey Murphy, Aimee Curley, Raisem High Rochelle Silver, Senator Gordley, V, and Ben Felix.
So it's unanimous.
V. Riviere. That's unanimous.
Also, Amy, there was a member of the public, Mr. Campbell, who was asking if he could speak.
Does the co-op want to hear from a member of the public outside of the public comment? All right, go ahead.
I want to apologize, first of all, to Dennis and Amy if I introduced some confusion with that. I think as you're looking at this, it's important to understand there's two different types of research. One of those pieces of research is statistically projectable to a larger population. That's the research that Dennis and Amy are primarily talking about, that PSU would essentially be just data collectors for. You're going to design it and analyze it. And that survey, if you do, and we've done this, others have done this, but if you do a 600 sample survey of the whole Portland general population, and you can project it to the whole population, you're going to get 85% of those are white Caucasians. Very few of them are, 20 to 30% have had contact with police. Most haven't, so they don't even have an opinion with direct experience. You're going to have some percentage who are LGBT. You're going to have some percentage, but they're all small. And you do the analysis, and then you come back and say, well, gee whiz, we'd like to tell you what African Americans think, but we don't have enough in this survey. They're representative with the population, but it's too small. So then you do that general population, so they would include all of those different groups you talked about. Most of them too small to draw a statistically reliable conclusion on. You oversample those groups, you can statistically oversample reliably, like African Americans, Latinos, and youth. Then there are groups like members of the deaf community or members of different communities or LGBT communities that don't, it's hard to define a population you can random sample. And that's what they're wrestling with. There's a completely separate thing that is community feedback collection. And that it's highly appropriate. It's just like if we collected surveys from everybody in this room. Would it be projectable to the population? Heck no. But would it be informative about what everybody in this room thinks? Absolutely. And that's a completely different thing, and you should keep those things separate, because the science part and what they're offering is they're going to design it, I assume come back to you, to this group with it, and then they can feedback with it, right? And then you'll do the analysis on it, and then you can get all mad at them for their analysis and all of that. But that's about the statistical projection. So keep those things separate. Otherwise, because I've worked on research projects as have our good professors, and otherwise it can just get really confused. So it's not about some unfairness of not reaching people. It's what happens when you do a true statistical projection, because the word minority means, statistically, it's smaller than the majority, and so it costs more and it's more complicated to find. I mean, just from a straight science standpoint. So that's what that's about. But I felt like that clarification might be of use. So that's all I want to say. And no, we would not bid on simply collecting the data. That's not. So I mean, it's a basic process.
So it is 8:07, which brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is regarding training. And comment here from.
And I'm not normally going to keep interjecting. I just want to encourage you to read the agreement where the city committed to doing a reliable, comprehensive, and representative survey. And I'm not a statistician, but we have them in the Department of Justice. We will hold the city accountable if they do something that does not qualify as that. So if you make a recommendation to the city that is not a reliable, comprehensive, and representative survey, and they take your recommendation, they won't be in compliance with our agreement. And vice versa, if they go ahead and do that type of survey, even at your disagreement, because you were not able to consult on something that would meet that requirement, I just don't want you to be critical of the city, because we're going to hold the city to that obligation. Of course, the community feedback is well written into other elements of your role, and so just make sure that as you're making these information collections to share as a group, that the city has restrictions imposed by the department and how we enforce it and what they've agreed to do.
What number was that out of the settlement agreement?
146A. Carry it with you.
Thank you.
All right, Ellen, do you want to find space at the table?
When did we get to do the proposal? We don't?
Thank you. Actually, we'll just
When you what?
step on up. Sort of stand. Okay. So they asked me to give you all kind of an overview of what training would be available to you. And so the city has a lot of training, and one of the first sort of priorities that we thought of was public meetings and public records law. But then I know from having had discussions with a number of you that there are lots of other trainings that you all want. And it seems like it might be appropriate for your newly formed executive committee to gather the information about what trainings this group wants and then prioritize those. And the city is not the only resource for you all in doing those trainings, because depending on the subject matter that you're seeking to be trained on, the Department of Justice, the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, the Portland Police Association, IPR. I mean, there's lots of different organizations that you all might want to bring to that training. So the city is here for you as a resource, but you certainly should not feel like we are the only people that can do training for you. But some of the requests that I have heard from this group about trainings are public meetings and public records law. The city attorney's office provides that training for our new elected officials, and that's a 45-minute to hour-long presentation that is distilled for you, so it's easy. There's bite size, there's takeaways there. So that's a training that you all certainly can request from our office, and we are prepared to give that to you whenever. And if you decide, there are 2 different dates that you want to do it, we're available to provide that training. Some of the other training I've heard is that people want to understand what the police bureau is doing and what kind of training police officers receive. And so, again, that is something that probably you'll want to have somebody from the police bureau come and do. I've heard that people want to understand a little bit more about how what is exactly the settlement agreement, what's in it, sort of a settlement agreement 101. That may be something where you want the city, to come to the table, the Albina Ministerial Alliance, the US DOJ, the Portland Police Association, to understand what the settlement agreement is. So I'm just here to say I've gotten a lot of feedback from you all about different kinds of trainings, and given the fact that there's more than just one request, which at first I thought was just, they just want to know about public meetings and public records, since it seems like there's more training requests out there. I thought maybe the way to handle it would be for the executive committee to figure out after interviewing the group, what kinds of trainings you all want to prioritize, and then who you want to provide that training. But if you are immediately interested in having a public meetings and public records law training, our office is ready to give you that whenever dates are convenient for you all. So.
Questions?
With regard to what's in the settlement
Agreement 101, how would what you would present be different from what we would get from the DOJ? You need to help me.
Yeah, sure. I don't think in actually speaking with the Albino Ministerial Alliance coalition attorney, it occurred to me, and you know, the testimony that you heard from Joanne Hardesty, that I mean, I think there is just a neutral way to give you over 101 foundation, but in the interest of having, you know, you all feel like it's coming from a trustworthy source, I can see that might be valuable to not have just the city or the DOJ. I mean, I don't think that you will get a difference in what the agreement says, but I think you might get sort of a richer interpretation about, you know, how the various provisions came to be, or what different parties hope that, you know, the agreement is going to achieve. It's sort of a richer dialogue. But in terms of just a settlement agreement 101, I do not think that you would get a different you know, summary of what that is from the Department of Justice or the city.
I want to be thoughtful in what I say next about Settlement Agreement 101. That was the subject for the first meeting, the very first meeting. That did not happen.
Yes.
And so I think that it would be appropriate for I don't know if it comes from you or others who structured the process, just to apologize for that huge oversight.
Thank you.
Huge oversight, because we're working with uneven understandings of what is in the settlement agreement. I don't know that we've all read it to the letter. And enough said. It's just mind-boggling, really, to be at this point and then to hear you offered Settlement Agreement 101.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate you sharing that with me directly and giving me an opportunity to say that, you know, I'm sorry, that the city is sorry, that I think the education that could have been provided was not, and we weren't very thoughtful about the way in which we tried to prepare you for this role. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to apologize, and I'm sorry that it's taken this long in the process for folks to get just a foundational understanding of what the agreement says. So I apologize, and thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because at some point, you know, we have to be honest about competency too, you know, and there's been some incompetence, and really I don't want to put you on the spot or make you feel bad.
No, I appreciate that.
But we're dealing with that as a city. And we need to call it out when we're experiencing it. That's all I'm saying.
No, thank you.
So B and then Philip, and we are running into the time we had set aside for subcommittees to give short reports.
No, go ahead.
No, I insist.
Just because we're running short on time here. It's my understanding that we can't vote through email. Is that correct? We must be voting while the whole COAB members are here. Is that correct? And that will increase our time that we need? I'm just thinking that maybe someone should make a motion in order to decide tonight before, that we should decide tonight about the training piece, which trainings we want, or so we can get going on that tonight, or so we can get this process moving, because honestly, we can't vote through email, so our options are limited. So I would like to motion that we should decide tonight which training we should want. That's my suggestion.
So are you moving to have a discussion about which training, or moving to ask the executive committee to facilitate this conversation?
I make a motion that we vote on if we would want the training. But we should decide tonight if we would like the training for the next meeting.
The whole COAB?
Yes.
So, sorry, to clarify, would the COAB be spending time tonight to outline what training you would like, or would you be asking the executive committee to come back with that recommendation?
I'm asking us to decide if we need training, and we'll elaborate on what kind of training we need later. But I'm asking us to decide if we can vote on if we need training. Does that make sense?
Is there a second? Second? Any discussion? All those,
So, we do need training, of course we do. We've said that at the very beginning. And so, but I don't think right now is a good time to come up with the outline. And we're not voting by email, everybody's gonna respond with what type of training they would like, and then we'll take a consensus as the executive committee to bring that back to the group so that we can formulate that.
Will that be referred to the subcommittee?
It's gonna come to the executive committee to do, and then we'll come back to the total COAB.
so Sharon, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, please.
And could you restate it?
Oh, boy.
The executive.
So the executive committee is going to direct which trainings we have through email, asking the general COAB what they would like to have, and then we'll come back to the group to get a formal
To share information.
share information and schedule the trainings.
And Philip, do you accept that friendly amendment? Yes. And is that seconded? Any discussion?
Just a point of information, I'm remembering our first meeting, and Mike Marshman attempted to give us a presentation that would have been a part of our training. That didn't happen, and so that would be an example of something we would want to go
Yes.
back and look at.
Yes.
And perhaps bring forward. And I want to acknowledge, Mike, that you were prepared that day to do a presentation, but it got derailed. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, could raise
Aye.
your paddles. Any opposed? We have one opposed. Any abstentions? Motion passes. We have subcommittee reports. The first subcommittee is the Community Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee, which I believe is Sharon Maxwell. So we had asked the chairs of these subcommittees to, because we have 10 minutes left, we'll have to be even a bit shorter, let us know when and where you're meeting, so folks know when that's happening, who's heading up the committee, and just very quick overview of what the committee's focused on.
Okay. I'll try it. All right, so reporting out on the community outreach and engagement. Our next meeting is next Thursday, April the 16th, and the location to be announced because we're trying to come up with a different location based on, we want to make it accessible, and we want to be able to go to different locations throughout the city. So apologize that we don't have that yet. And reporting as far as the hearing and our work that we did, you've kind of already heard what kind of happened because we actually came together as a group and planned it out, but it didn't go, once the hearing happened, it didn't go the way we thought it would. So this next meeting, what we'll be focusing on is the larger ongoing outreach of how we're going to continue to connect with the people throughout the whole city, what that looks like, our approaches, our methods. And so we've been sending out email, and we've been asking the whole COAB to send us your ideas so that when we have the meetings, doesn't mean that you have to be there, but if you've already sent suggestions, then we can deliberate and talk about that and then come back to you all here and bring back and share that information to see what the consensus is on how we continue to conduct the community outreach and make advisement to the COCO. Okay, for the data committee, myself and Jimmy are the leaders of the community outreach, and for the data, right now, Tom and I are co-leading that, and let's see, okay. So basically, what I wanted to report out is that we're meeting the third Monday of each month, and we will meet more as necessary if needed twice a month, but we would let the whole COAB know. Right now, our next location, because we were meeting at the old, I think it was East Precinct, that there was some discussion that was not appropriate, so we are looking for a different location. So we will send that location out by email with the announcement. So for that next meeting. And then I wanted to report back on just some of our topics of discussion that we didn't address here tonight, that the group wanted to have, well, I think we kind of got clarification on subcommittees and acting independently. And within that, the vote got clarified, issue around voting. Alternates, that got clarified, and the executive committee got formed, so that's good. The second one is that we were asking for some form of legal counsel that would not be a conflict with the city providing legal counsel, which we did not get to, or maybe that would be directed to the Department of Justice and the COCO and to the city. And then the third one is as it relates to reports and changes, we were asking for some way of redlining when there are new changes to different reports and things that we'll be analyzing. And that's it. So am I able to get a response? Are we able to get a response tonight on having legal counsel for the COAB when we feel like we need to address issues because we feel that there's a conflict with the city's council?
I am just checking again the memo that we sent out yesterday. Oh.
Point.
I'd like to make a point that the public was to speak from 8:15 to 8:30, and I hope in the future we'll be able to offer them more respect.
Well, they spoke earlier. We moved them to
They
earlier.
spoke earlier. That was the way we announced that.
That was.
Okay.
Okay, well, never mind.
Okay, so, I'll just, because, we are a bureaucracy and this language was all approved, so we were clear with you about where we were. So on the second page, there's 2 open bullets and 2 blackened bullets, so it's the second blackened bullet down. And that is our telling you that we do not think there's a conflict and we do not think the COAB needs independent legal counsel. And the justification for that is spelled out there.
Okay.
So the last subcommittee is the Mental Health Crisis Response Committee. I believe a chair may have been a co-chairs. Take it away, co-chairs.
I'm co-chairing with Dr. Alicia. And for our upcoming meeting, our scheduled meeting is going to be on May 7th, which is the first Thursday. It will be on the first Thursdays of the month thereafter. The time will be 6:30 to 8:30. We don't have a location as of yet for similar reasons described previously by others. The other Sharon. And so in that regard, so what our goal is going to be is to go over in detail the police directives, their response to mental health crisis, which are very detailed. But we're going to ask, and hopefully you can respond to this tonight, whether we need a time extension to be able to look at that, because the responses are due on May 2nd, and our first meeting isn't scheduled until May 7th. And we can scramble and jump through hoops and do stuff to try to get it before the 2nd, but it won't be in the context of a scheduled meeting where we can really discuss in detail. So is there any way to extend the time to respond to those directives that have been posted?
So
Yeah.
the way that the directives work in the city's structure is that they put them out for public comment generally, and there's a 30-day window.
Right.
Those are not, those agreements or those directives don't go into effect on the 30th day. The city then goes back for its own internal review process.
But we,
But can somebody like formally make a request? Because we want, because that's a part of our, we see that as a part of our role,
I got
right,
it.
to advise, to offer
And so I
our
think
feedback.
you're asking the city if
Yes.
they will take your comments after their 30-day window has
yes,
closed.
correct.
yes, officially
So
receive our comments.
But to, yeah, employ. We got it, Joanne.
And so I'm not going to put the city on the spot
I love you.
today.
You know I love her.
But it's a request that I think you and through your executive committee can put to the city, and the city can take that into consideration, and they'll check with us if they need to, and they should get
Seems
you a response.
Okay, and then do you think we'd be able to maybe get a response, like within the week, or by next week,
So
top
we
of the
know.
week next week, so that we know? It would give us, because we can work to try to
Right.
meet the May 2nd timeline, but when
I'm
can we get a
hopeful that
response?
someone for the city could answer your question.
Who's from the city? Right. Alan. Oh, hi, Alan.
Yeah, I mean,
Might be able to.
I think that you should submit, let's do it this way. Why don't you all submit the request to me, and then I can get it to the appropriate folks at PPB with and explain the situation that you need a timely response.
Now, should Amy from the COCO submit that, or should we submit that as co-chairs from this subcommittee?
Either one. I think
Okay.
either one's fine. It's not a procedural thing, it's just a communication
Just a request?
thing.
Perfect. Okay, we'll do it. Sharon, do you want to? Okay. Oh, okay. Do it together.
Anything?
Nope. We just got work to do, and we hope that we can get the extension so that we can give meaningful feedback.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, in closing this up, a couple quick comments. One is, please try to use the forums that Amy has set up that we, for dialogue and exchange so that we can follow the rules on city ordinances and all that stuff. And give other people opportunities to have a voice. Also, we kind of have it set up this way, but having a member of the COCO team be a part of and help facilitate these subcommittees so that we can, the dialogue earlier about us communicating and being on the same page. Amy's going to be with the community outreach, or can you? Yes. And as you know, the two Amy's, Amy R and Amy W. Amy Watson is already on the mental health, working with the mental health, and Tom, stand up Tom, is with the data systems people. So if we can keep them engaged, that way we're the COCO and the COAB are on the same page. And
Excuse me.
yeah.
Just clarification, so Amy R is replacing Judge Dominguez on
Yes,
this?
for now.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, I just being
Thank you.
Only
clarified.
for that subcommittee role, not generally.
Right.
No,
Right.
just for
Right.
that.
No, I just for that
And-
committee.
A couple things, just in closing. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just got the feeling that we are rebooting and that we're getting some progress here tonight, and that people are, at least there's more clarity about how we can work together, and also that hopefully people feel they have a voice and an independence. The PSU thing is a good example. I'm fine with that. We're fine with that. Whatever you guys want to do on that as a recommendation, to the city. And we just look forward to working with you and moving ahead. So closing comments from others?
Yes, I would like to say this to Captain Vince Elmore.
Look at his face.
I want it to be known here at this table that Captain Elmore has played a role in helping to keep my son safe and alive in the Portland community. My son, who lives with an illness, schizophrenia, has had encounters that could have taken his life. And I honor who you are and that you showed up when it counted to help save a life. Thank you.
We had Sharon and then Emmanuel, and then we'll close.
I'm sorry. Clarification, please. On when we can expect reports from the DOJ and from the COCO so that right now we can leave this evening with anticipated date of when the information is coming to us, so people can have that on their calendars and we can kind of coalesce around those dates.
So I was going to ask that the 5 members of the new executive committee, if you could stay after for
Okay.
3 minutes, and we could coordinate that first meeting, where I think that's probably the first order of business, is putting out that timeline.
Great. Perfect.
And Emmanuel?
Very quickly, I strongly feel like we as the COAB board, not only myself but other people feel, we would love to see a full allocated budget for this whole COAB process. That way, when people run into scheduling conflicts or buying flyers or providing food or reaching out, cold calling people, emailing, spending extra time over the 10 hours that we've already spent, I think it would be very beneficial if we could have a budget where we could look at it, where we could see where we fall into line. That way, we eliminate all questions of accountability and transparency. We want to see that. It will help us. It would help our community. It'll help all of us kind of really be inclusive and make more of a community. And as we go forward, I really want to put that out there, and I think we all need it. I want to see it just for myself and for clarification for the people I have to run into in my community when they ask me, what are we doing?
And don't forget the office. We need an office space.
Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.